I'm Austin with Apex Investing, and today I got a shiny new green screen back there. Well, I can see it, you can't, but rest assured that you'll be able to benefit from this thing hogging up most of my living room. Anyway, so I wanted to start a new segment that's going to be posted on the forums on a semi-regular basis. Maybe I'll call it From the Help Desk. Maybe you can help me come up with a better title. At any rate, I got the age-old question from a user named TJ today in live chat, and he posed the question of, why does it take so long for NinjaTrader to load my charts? He went on to say that he increased his RAM and expected that to impact chart load times, and it did not. So today I'm going to go over with you the different components of your computer on a very technical level, but I'll try not to go way out there, as to what they do and how they actually impact the load times of charts in NinjaTrader. I'm also going to be running a test, and spoiler alert, I've already done this and the results are quite shocking. So without further ado, let's switch over to my other desktop. Well, oh, my mouse was on the other computer. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to close down NinjaTrader completely. And this is actually a good segue into me explaining to you the difference between, oh, there's an update. The difference between clearing all of your cache and only clearing your recent cache. Okay, so what I'm going to do, this is going to be for the test that we're going to do in a few minutes, is clear the cache in NinjaTrader first, and you could do that by loading up our toolkit and going to Tools, and you have two options: clear recent NinjaTrader cache and clear all NinjaTrader's data cache. Now, what these options do, let's see if it's actually posted yet. Okay, it does. Well, here we go. We've actually added these. That was really quick. We've already added the descriptions in there. That's fantastic. Okay, so if you trade every day, this option for recent cache, use this option each time before you open your charts to maintain correct data. For data errors, toolkit updates, or if you have skipped more than one day of trading, use the clear all data option. All right, and then the clear all NinjaTrader's cache, use this option if you have corrupt data, broken charts, if it has been more than one trading day since you cleared recent cache and opened your charts. And note, clearing all data will cause your charts to take longer to load, but the data will load cleanly. I would also like to add in here that if you're having any kind of weird issues, like any weird issues, volume not lining up, or maybe your bars are really squished, or you have like skips in data, like whatever it is, like if one day you loaded your workspace and the chart loaded perfectly fine and the next day things look wonky, this should always be your go-to step for troubleshooting your issues. Clear all your cache, wipe it out, nuke it, and start over. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this cache to get ready for our results, and while that's okay, it's done, I'm going to go ahead and install the latest toolkit version just to make sure. Looks like something was released in beta. So there we go. I've cleared my cache. I am up to date. And now let's go over the actual computer components. Okay, so with what TJ initially said with him adding, doubling his RAM, let's go over what RAM does. RAM is just a storage house for components. So if I open up Resource Manager right now, here we go, Task Manager, look at my performance. I have 4.9 gigs of almost 16 gigabytes of memory used up. And that's running, I have a few things open on my other workspace as well. But regardless, all that leftover memory is what can be used to load more charts. So memory isn't necessarily a direct correlation to how fast your charts open, but how much more you can have open. So think of your memory as like this giant warehouse, right? Or a warehouse, and depending on the size of your warehouse, how many gigs of memory you have, that's how many charts you can store in it and have active at one given time. Now, a caveat to this is it will impact load times if you have a very small amount of available memory. So let's say you have a 32-bit system and you've got 4 gigs installed. Windows will only access 3.5 gigs of that available RAM because it's a 32-bit OS and that's what they do. And let's say you're running Windows 7 that you've had it for about a year now, so you've had some apps installed. So when you boot up, you're probably using about 2.5 gigs, maybe 3 gigs of that available memory. Then you load up NinjaTrader, you load up Hotcom, you load up Chrome, which is a huge memory resource hog. And next thing you know, you're at your capacity. Your warehouse is full. Your memory is maxed, right? So as you try to open charts, what then's going to happen is Windows is going to say, okay, well, we don't have any more room in our warehouse. So instead of using our RAM for storage, we're going to use the hard drive for storage. And that will significantly decrease your load times. Like that's a huge impact. So I recommend as a starting point for NinjaTrader, just to make sure you have enough room to run, at the very least, maybe a dozen Chrome tabs, NinjaTrader with maybe 20 charts or so open, Hotcom, and the operating system and whatever else you might have on Skype or something like that. I'd say start with at least 8 gigs of RAM and make sure you're using a 64-bit operating system because otherwise you won't be able to access but 3.5 gigs. Okay, so if memory doesn't really impact load speed, what else can? Well, CPU, sort of. If you have a really old processor, that can impact the load times of the charts, albeit very insignificantly though. I'm actually going to run you through the process of what happens when we load a chart, and I'm going to show you where it's actually very, very hard hitting on the CPU, and it's very small. But as long as you have, a CPU that's within the past 5 to 7 years, give or take, you should be fine. Cores in NinjaTrader 7, I don't want to get too complicated here, but let's just say the most recent your processor is, the better. But if it's a few years old, it's not that big of a deal. Will it impact chart times? Yes, but not that much. All right, so moving on, the other thing was the hard drive. Okay, so that was another question that was posed. The type of hard drive you have can impact load times somewhat. Not much, but somewhat. So if you have a solid state drive, you've probably heard of solid state drives. I have several of them and love them, but that doesn't really impact the load time of the charts as much as it impacts the load time of NinjaTrader. So the solid state drive is a permanent warehouse facility as opposed to the RAM, which I guess would have been more of a in and out docking bay. Anyways, I digress. The solid state drive will allow faster read and write times to access your programs. So you'll be able to launch NinjaTrader a lot faster. You'll be able to load the resources off the disk that we need for our toolkit faster. But will a solid state drive over a plattered spinning hard drive actually improve the chart load times? Not much. If you're using a laptop with a 5400 slow spinning platter drive, it might tack on a couple of extra seconds. All right, so the last thing we're going to talk about is your available bandwidth. Will my internet speeds impact my chart time? Absolutely, they will impact your chart load times in a great way. If you have a really, really slow bandwidth, slow network, then it could slow down the chart load times significantly upon the first time loading them. However, and this is where things get interesting, we're going to run a test. First, let's run a speed test. All right, so I'm on speedtest.net. I'm not going to share the screen with you because I don't want you guys having my IP address, but I'm going to run a test right now, and I will screenshot the results and bring them over so you can see them. All right, so my ping is 18 milliseconds. My download speed is 90.10 megabits per second. That's very important to know the difference. Some people get that confused. If it's big M, little b, that's megabit. If it's big M, big B, that's megabyte. It's a huge difference between the two. And my upload speed is 12.24 megabits per second. So I will screenshot that small little section just so you can see it. I just ran this results. That is a pretty decent speed. It's the average tier, like medium of the road, not business class, but high for consumer grade internet provided by Comcast. So again, it's 90 megabits down and 12 and a quarter up with an 18 millisecond ping to whatever server I'm close to. Okay, so let's see what happens. We are going to open, okay, so over here, right above me, I have my resource monitor open and I'm looking at the network tab. On this network tab, I'm going to select the NinjaTrader from the list. So keep in mind, we just closed, or we just cleared the cache, all the cache in NinjaTrader, and updated the latest toolkit version. So here we go. I'm going to launch NinjaTrader 7. It's authorizing me with Apex servers. Apex like that. Okay, file connect to NinjaTrader demo feed. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to select NinjaTrader from the list, and we're going to pay attention to just NinjaTrader. We don't care about any of the other traffic that might be going on. We're going to look at just how much bandwidth NinjaTrader uses. All right, so connecting to the data feed. Now I'm kind of stabled off. I'm not really connected to much. I'm at about 50 bytes per second. So remember, the big B means bytes. A little b would signify bits. So it's waning down, 36 bytes per second, and that's just sitting here not doing anything. All right, now I'm going to open a chart, and we're going to pay attention to how much this number right here goes up, and we're going to do some calculations to see how that's impacted. So something to note here, the longest delay when opening a chart, like what makes it take the longest, is receiving the data from your data provider. So the process of opening and how the components are used, you load NinjaTrader. That's using your hard drive. So I got a solid state drive, NinjaTrader loaded pretty quick. Now I need to load a chart. So what's going to happen is, now that I have no cache created, it's going to download fresh data from my data provider, and that's going to be using my bandwidth to download all of this data. The write time to the hard drive to create the cache is insignificant. It's not going to apply here at all. So the initial loading, and you'll see right down here in the bottom right hand corner, it'll say loading, it'll say the instrument and the contract of the data that it's loading. And that is going to take the longest amount of time. After it's done loading and it's saved, and it might have to go through a couple of iterations of downloading previous contracts, because I'm going to load 125 days worth of data. After this little message down here in the bottom right goes away, that is where the CPU takes over and it says, okay, I've got all of this data downloaded. What do you want me to do with it? So right then and there, your CPU is going to kick into overdrive and it's going to run tons of calculations, because you got to remember, loading our custom bars in NinjaTrader are tick-based bars, and there are a lot of ticks. I mean, it could be millions of ticks, especially depending on the instrument that you're loading. I mean, a lot of ticks, and it has to run algorithms depending on the indicator that's being loaded, you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, millions of times, like depending on how much data you're loading and what instrument you're loading. So all of that information is going to be very small, and you'll see that once this goes away, the data is done downloading and the chart is actually processing in the background. That's where your CPU takes over, and it's also storing it into RAM at the same time. But anyways, I'm trying not to make this too complicated. So again, we're going to pay attention to the network speed over here. So I'm going to do File, New, Chart. I'm going to load, let's do the NASDAQ. We're going to do continuum bars. Let's just do 812. We're going to load a chart template, something, let's do iZone Sharpshooter with a white background. And Look at this. My bytes are sitting around 500 bytes per second. And I'm not actually done anything yet, except it might be loading up instrument details in the background for NinjaTrader. All right, so I'm going to click OK. And right here, let me move this out of the way. All right, right here, you see it says loading data in queue December 15. And it's showing the dates from 11/2/2015 to whatever that date was. It's saving. Now it's on to the next contract, 3/16. And I'll look over here, our bytes per second being downloaded. We are up to 134, 165, 180, 190. And it looks like we're hovering about 190. And we're still loading the contract for 3/16. That's now saving. See, that's saving over here. Oh, we're loading more. Okay, we're going back. We're processing. Okay, right now it's done loading, and now the CPU is kicking in. It's processing all of the data. Oh, wait, it still shows I'm receiving data. 186. Okay, it's backing down. So right now my CPU is actually working. Yep, there it is, and it's done. So you'll see here my CPU usage went up. See that very short, that little spike right here? I mean, we're talking maybe, what was it, 10 seconds at most? That spike is where the CPU kicked in, was actually processing the chart. So our indicators are actually fairly well optimized. They load pretty fast. I just wanted to show you that the longest amount of time it takes to loading a chart is actually downloading that cache. So I peaked at, we'll call it 200 bytes per second. Now, what does that actually translate to? And this is the shocking part. So I'm going to open up a calculator here. And I've already got the data conversion on Windows 10. They have converters down here, which is actually very, very useful. So I'm going to convert, let's change this to bytes to megabits, which is what my bandwidth test was ran at. Do I still have that open? I don't, but it's no big deal. All right, so bytes, we are at about 200,000, which translates to 1.5 megabits. Now, if you remember, and I'll bring this back over here. Can I make this smaller? Here we go. Put this over here. If you remember, my download speed was 90.10 megabits per second. My max download from the data provider was 1.52 megabits per second. So this little test shows that for whatever reason, the data provider is throttling how quickly we can receive the data from them, because clearly I have enough bandwidth to download all of that information a lot faster. But either they're throttling us for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they have tons and tons of people connecting to their servers and downloading data, or maybe it's shared. But for whatever the reason, each time that I've done this test, it's about the same. So I'm going with, we're probably throttled from the data provider at this speed. I don't know of any way to increase that speed, or yeah, I mean that's it. So that's shocking. I mean, I could literally download this at I need a regular calculator. 90 divided by 1.52-ish. Okay, I don't know what happened. Okay, well, my calculator doesn't work, but that's beyond the point. The point is, that's the longest part of the process, is downloading data from them. So now let's take a quick look. I won't go through that. I will, however, show you the difference between loading a tick chart and loading a minute chart, just real quick before I let you go. So I'm going to do a new chart. We're going to do a completely new instrument. So I loaded, what was it, the NASDAQ before, I think. Yeah. We loaded NQ before. So So I'm going to do new chart. Probably not all of these indicators are going to work. Let's do comparable with the NASDAQ. We'll go with the Dow. I'm going to do a minute-based chart. And you know what? We'll make it a really small amount. 1 minute based chart. So I'm going to show you how fast this goes because I'm going to show you the comparison between minute data and tick data. So I'm going to load the same template, even though it might come out looking funky because I don't know if this chart's intended to be used with minute charts, but regardless, everything else is the same. Click OK. Here we go. Loading contracts. Loading is done. Now the CPU is processing all of the data. And that was fast. So basically, tick data is every single time the instrument ticks, it's logging information, whereas minute-based data, it's only loading the open, the high, the low, and the close of every minute. Now that might sound like a lot because we're doing 125 days and there's what, 60 minutes to an hour, 24 hours to a day. Multiply that times 125, that sounds like a lot, but remember, we're talking about potentially millions of individual ticks. Every single time a contract is bought or sold and it's causing the chart to move a tick, that data is what's being downloaded. And there's a lot more ticks than just once per minute. So that's why minute charts load so quick and why tick-based charts take so long to load. Long story short, we're being throttled from the data provider, and if we could find some way around that, that would probably speed up load times, but that would be a huge cost potentially on Continuum or FXEM or whoever the data provider may be at the time to upgrade their servers and bandwidth, throughput, and all of that jazz. It will cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to set all that up. So hopefully this video helped you out in some way. Maybe you realize that it's not just you, maybe it's everyone. I myself have a really fast updated computer. I've got one of the latest processors. I've got a solid state drive. I've got all these jazzy things. So your mileage might vary. Your computer might be a little bit slower than mine. But bear in mind that it's not necessarily our fault for the charts loading slow. That's another complaint I hear all the time. Why is it that your charts on NinjaTrader run so slow, but when I open up my charts on Name Your Charting platform, there's tons out there, they go so fast? Well, it's because they might have dedicated data coming from somewhere else, or who knows, but it's definitely not us. Our load times takes seconds. I mean, it took me at most 10 seconds to load a chart. It was just the cache in the background. So just for curiosity's sake, I'm going to close that chart and I'm going to open up a brand new one. Now that the data is actually cached, I'm going to compare to see how long it takes for the chart to open now. The same exact chart that I opened earlier. So a NASDAQ chart, 125 days, go back to Continuum bars. Did I have it set to 8 or 10? I don't remember. We'll set it to 8. Regardless, all the ticks are there. Okay. Oh, I got to load the template. White. Go. All right, so we'll see. It's not downloading the data because the data is already being downloaded. And you'll see over here, the bytes per second is not going up into the hundreds of thousands like it was earlier. See, just a quick flash. It needs to download the ticks that happened between the time that I closed the chart and the time that I open the chart now. So it took the time to access all of that memory that's on the hard drive. It's stored in the memory. You've seen the quick little load there, and then the CPU kicked in, and there it is. So the load time, that's why the cache is there. That's why the cache is there in the first place, so you don't have to download all of the tick data again and speed up your charts. So Austin, why would you want to clear all of your cache at all if it takes your chart this much longer to load? Well, as previously stated in the video, if you have any crazy things going on with your charts, maybe the data looks funky, or you're not matching someone else's chart in the Elite Room, or you're getting crazy errors that you can't find a quick solution for, clearing all of your cache is a good troubleshooting step to start off with. That's one of the reasons. Another reason is throughout the day, as you are trading, you're not getting all of the tick data. You're only getting a percentage of the tick data. I don't know the exact percentage. I haven't done any tests to actually determine that. I could do tests, but that would be very time consuming. Let's just spitball a number and say 10%. Maybe you're getting 10% of the actual ticks that take place on your chart. So clearing all of your history and downloading a full set of history is a good way to ensure that you're getting every single tick that happened so that the charts are as accurate as possible. Anyways, I hope this video helped you in some way and that the green screen was at least somewhat appealing. If you have any questions or concerns, or maybe I left something out in the video that you need answered, please go ahead and ask in the comments underneath this thread, and I will try to pay attention to it and answer your question, or maybe add it into a future video. Anyways, thanks for watching and happy trading.